The night the Almira moved on its own. I was around 6 or 7 when it happened. It's been over a decade, but the memory of that night is still burned into my mind, as if it happened yesterday. No exaggeration. This was real. I know what I saw, and to this day I have no explanation for it. It all started with a horror movie. I don't remember the title, but there was a particular scene that unsettled me. I had watched it in the morning, but later that evening, while flipping through the channels, I stumbled upon the same scene again. I wasn't scared yet, but a strange uneasiness lingered. That night, I went to bed as usual. Mum and I shared a bed back then, and right behind my head stood an Almira. In front of the bed was a mirror, perfectly positioned to reflect the Almira if I happened to look at it. The room was dimly lit, just enough to make out shapes in the darkness. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but it must have been around 2 a.m. That eerie silence filled the air, the kind where everything feels off. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, an inexplicable unease settling over me. Then I heard it. A creaking sound. At first I brushed it off as a wooden furniture settling. But then, in the mirror's reflection, I saw it. The Almira's handle was moving, slowly, deliberately. My entire body froze. I was wide awake, and I knew what I was seeing was real. I wasn't dreaming. The handle twisted all the way, and the door creaked open, just enough for a sliver of darkness to spill out, and then nothing. The door stayed open, but something had changed. The air felt heavier, like the very atmosphere in the room had shifted. I was too scared to move, too scared to even breathe too loudly. I wanted to wake my mum, but I couldn't. I felt like if I moved, whatever was there would notice me. 5 minutes passed. Maybe more. It felt like forever. Then, just as I squeezed my eyes shut and started praying in my head, I even pinched myself, hoping I'd wake up, if this was some kind of nightmare. But it wasn't. When I finally drifted off, probably out of sheer exhaustion, I woke up to daylight. My first thought was the Almira. I turned to look at it. It was shut, just like normal. But I knew what had happened. I asked my mum if she'd heard anything. She brushed it off, saying I must have been dreaming. But I wasn't. To this day, I know what I saw. The way the handle moved, the way the door opened on its own. It wasn't normal. That night changed something in me. I don't scare easily anymore, but I will never forget the sheer terror of lying there, helpless as something unseen moved right in front of me. Whatever it was, I hope it never comes back. When I was young, I used to go and stay with my grandmother. Now for context, my grandma did not live in a house. She lived in a cabin in the middle of the woods, completely off-grid, on a multi-acre property. No power, no water, nothing. There was a generator that we would use for about an hour a day to use basic amenities and whatnot, but for the most part it was dark and cold. Living off-grid also means there are no bathrooms, only outhouses. So that being said, any time you needed to use the restroom. You had to walk a pretty long distance from the cabin to the outhouse, about a football field's length or so. During the daytime, it's not a problem at all. You can see, and it's not as intense. However, at night, it's a different story. One night, while I was staying with her, I had woken up desperately needing to pee. Usually, if I needed to go in the middle of the night, she wanted me to wake her up so she could walk with me. But I was feeling independent, or as independent as a 10-year-old can feel. I quietly got out of bed and made my way to the door, grabbing a flashlight as I went. I started walking through the dense woods to the outhouse when I heard a branch snap in the distance. Now at this point, I was already deeply regretting not waking my grandma up to walk with me. But hearing an animal or something walk not 40 feet from me scared me so bad I froze. My mind immediately went to thinking it was a mountain lion or another aggressive animal. But when I pointed my flashlight in the direction of the sound, my heart hit the floor. There, standing less than a rock's throw away, was a person. I was completely frozen in place, not being able to process what I was seeing. It wasn't a normal person. Something was wrong, very wrong. Their face was contorted into a vile grin, teeth bared and neck tilted. They were standing weird, their stance wide but their shoulders haunched. With that tilted neck, it looked unnatural. At this point, I'm not even sure I was breathing. I remember the flashlight in my hand shaking so bad that I couldn't tell if the figure was moving closer to me or if it was just a trick of the light. And that's when it started to beckon me. Its contorted body began moving its arm, trying to summon me to it. It was like watching someone try to beckon their pet. And while it did, its grin widened impossibly, and its head seemed to fall even more to the side, almost at a completely inverted angle, like its neck was broken. I was horrified. It was at that moment that the fear seemed to shake the shock from my body, and I broke into a full sprint. In classic horror movie fashion, I tripped and dropped my flashlight, but that didn't stop me. I bounced off the ground and continued to run for my life, blasting through the front door so hard I fell to the ground inside the cabin. My grandma awoke to this and came sprinting inside to see what was going on. Breathlessly, with tears streaming down my face, I said nothing and just pointed. There, outside, with the flashlight's beam perfectly illuminating it, was the crooked man, still beckoning me with his hand. My grandma's reaction to this was honestly the scariest part. She seemed utterly unaffected and proceeded to open the front door, much to my screaming disapproval. She walked down the front porch, into the dark, and began yelling at the man. "I told you to leave. You're not welcome here," she said. "Not moving on is one thing, but scaring my granddaughter is the last straw. Leave, before I make you leave." And with that, she came back into the cabin and locked the door. I stood there in complete shock. "Grandma, why is that man at your house?" I said, with fear still riddling my body. And her response made my body run cold. "He used to live here, but he died. He can't seem to move on, even though he chose to leave this world." I was floored. "How did he die, Grandma?" I asked. And my grandma, the ever so honest woman she is, told me exactly how. He hung himself in those trees over there, and that seems to be where he stays. Whispers in the snow. It was winter in Kashmir, the kind of winter where the world turns white and quiet, like nature's holding its breath. I was on my way to a remote village. What for? Work? Adventure? Honestly, it doesn't matter anymore. All I remember is the cold, biting and unforgiving, and how the snow seemed to swallow every sound. I found this house. It wasn't much, but it was better than freezing to death outside. At least, that's what I told myself. Inside, it smelled like damp wood and something faintly metallic. I tried not to think about it. For a while, it felt safe. The fire crackled, the snowstorm raged outside, and for the first time in hours, I could feel my fingers again. I even started to relax. Maybe too much. That's when I saw the shadow, just there, against the wall. I told myself it was nothing, just the fire playing tricks on me. But I had the feeling someone was watching me. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I swear I heard footsteps. Not outside, inside, slow, deliberate, like someone didn't want me to wake, but wanted me to know they were there. There was nothing, just an empty room and my own stupid imagination. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. But the unease wouldn't go away. Finally, I decided to step outside to clear my head. And that's when I saw them. The footprints in the snow outside. They weren't mine. The prints led away from the house, into the trees. They were fresh, too fresh, and they weren't going anywhere. They just stopped, right in the middle of the clearing, like whoever made them vanished into thin air. I didn't want to go back out. Whatever was out there. I don't know what happened next. The light went out, and I heard a whisper right next to my ear. It said my name. How did it know my name? I ran. I didn't look back, not once. Even now, I can't tell you what I saw or heard that night. Maybe it was all in my head, maybe it wasn't. But if you ever find yourself alone in the snow and you feel like you're being watched, don't stay, just run.